All right, let's dive into Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's the book, that everyone's been talking about.
Yeah.
So today we're going to unpack all that juicy wisdom about how our habits can make or break us.
Yeah.
And figure out if our habits are, helping us get to where we want to be or maybe holding us back a little bit.
Yeah. What's interesting about James Clear is he's not, some kind of superhuman that was, just born with these perfect routines.
Right.
He actually developed his whole approach to habits after he had this really freak accident in high school. He was playing baseball and he had a really serious injury and he actually ended up in a coma.
Oh my gosh, from a coma to a productivity guru, that's a wild journey.
It is, and it's really inspiring because, he used these small habits to completely rebuild his life, and he went on to, become an academic All-American.
Right.
So it wasn't like, some big overnight success story. It was just the power of these small, consistent actions that he was taking every day.
So it's not about some massive overnight transformation.
Yeah, right.
It's more like the small stuff we do every day can really build up over time.
Yeah, it's more like that airplane analogy that James Clear uses.
Okay.
If you slightly change the course of an airplane at takeoff,
right,
you can end up in a totally different country by the time you land.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with our habits. He calls this the power of tiny gains, like just getting 1% better or 1% worse each day.
Okay.
And, over time, those seemingly insignificant changes can really compound into something significant.
That's actually kind of scary when I think about all the bad habits I've let slide.
Right.
But also really exciting to think about all the good ones that I could be building.
Exactly.
So if it's all about these small changes, how do we even begin to identify our own habits, good or bad?
Yeah.
They feel so ingrained. It's like breathing.
Right. Well, that's where understanding something called the habit loop becomes really crucial.
Okay.
And it's basically the engine that drives all of our habits.
Yeah.
And there are 4 stages to it. There's a cue. Okay.
There's a craving, there's a response, and then there's a reward. And it's like a program that's running in the background. And James Clear does a fantastic job in the book of kind of breaking down each of these stages so that we can better understand how they work.
Cue, craving, response, reward. That sounds a little technical. Can you give me an example of how that might play out in my own life?
Sure. Think about, that afternoon slump that you get at work.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe around 3 p.m. So your cue might be the clock hitting 3 p.m.
Yep.
The craving might be for a burst of energy.
Yeah.
Your response is that you go grab a sugary snack.
Yeah.
And the reward is that temporary sugar rush that you get.
You just, perfectly described my day. But I thought I was craving the chocolate, not the energy.
It's a subtle distinction, but it's a really powerful one.
Okay.
We often crave the feeling that a habit delivers, not necessarily the habit itself.
Oh, okay.
So we don't crave scrolling through social media. We crave distraction.
Right.
We don't crave smoking a cigarette. We crave stress relief or some kind of emotional regulation.
So it's really understanding what is that underlying craving that's driving the habit.
Okay, mind blown. So once we figure out this program that's kind of running in the background of our lives, how do we reprogram it? Let's talk about making good habits stick, because I think that's the goal, right?
Absolutely. And James Clear lays out these 4 laws of behavior change that we can use to kind of hack our habits and make them work for us.
I love a good hack. Let's hear it.
All right. So the first one is make it obvious. And it's basically about designing your environment in a way that makes those good habit cues impossible to miss.
Okay, so if I want to drink more water, I should have a full water bottle on my desk staring me in the face.
Exactly. Or let's say you want to read more before bed. Put a book on your pillow.
Okay.
You can't miss it. It's about making those cues so obvious that they trigger the desired action almost automatically.
I like it.
Yeah.
But what about those days when willpower is just low? Even if I have the book on my pillow, I might still reach for my phone and scroll through Instagram instead. How do we make those good habits more appealing?
That's where the second law comes in. Make it attractive. And basically, we're wired to repeat things that feel good.
Okay.
So we have to tap into our reward system and make those good habits something that we actually look forward to.
This is where it gets tricky for me. Working out, it doesn't always feel like a good time.
I hear you.
Any tips on how to make something like that more appealing?
Well, James Clear uses this fascinating example of Laszlo Polgar, who was a chess master.
Okay.
And he raised his daughters to be chess prodigies.
Wow.
And he did this by intentionally creating a culture where chess was the norm. So he made it attractive for them. He made it aspirational.
So it's about surrounding yourself with people who already embody the habits that you want.
Exactly. So if you want to start running, find a running group, or if you want to eat healthier, find some friends that are already doing that, and it will just make it so much easier to stick with it.
That makes a lot of sense. But sometimes, even with the right environment and all the motivation, starting a new habit can feel really overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Like the idea of going to the gym 5 days a week.
I feel that.
I already feel exhausted.
So that's where the third law comes in. Make it easy.
Okay.
It's about reducing the friction and simplifying the steps involved in building that habit.
Okay. So instead of vowing to run a marathon, maybe I should just start by putting on my running shoes.
Exactly. James Clear calls this the 2-minute rule. And it's basically about breaking down any new habit into a version that takes less than 2 minutes to start.
Okay.
So clean the kitchen becomes wash one dish, write a novel becomes write one sentence.
Okay.
The point is to make starting so ridiculously easy that you can't say no.
I like this.
And then once you get started, you're much more likely to keep going.
Okay, loving these tips. But let's be honest, sometimes even those tiny actions can still feel like a chore.
Right.
So how do we make those good habits truly stick and become something that we actually enjoy doing?
Yeah, well, that's where the fourth law comes in. Make it satisfying. And basically, our brains are wired to love instant gratification.
Okay.
So we have to find ways to make those good habits immediately rewarding.
Oh, instant gratification. Now you're speaking my language. Tell me more.
So there's this incredible study that James Clear talks about in the book.
Okay.
And it was a hand-washing experiment in Pakistan.
Okay.
And they found that simply by adding pleasant-smelling soap, they dramatically increased hand-washing rates and actually reduced the spread of disease.
So nice-smelling soap saved lives. It's amazing.
It is. And it just goes to show that these tiny changes can really make a big difference.
Okay, I'm convinced. But before we move on, I have to ask about the bad habits.
Yeah.
You know, we've been talking about building good ones.
Yeah.
But what about those nasty bad habits that just won't quit? How do we break free from those? Because that feels like a whole other beast.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we're going to tackle that head on in the next part of our Deep Dive. We're going to uncover all of James Clear's strategies for making those bad habits less appealing.
Maybe.
And explore how we can actually use friction to our advantage.
All right, I can't wait. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll continue our deep dive into atomic habits and unlock even more secrets to building a life that we love, one tiny habit at a time.
Last time we talked about how to make those good habits stick.
Right.
Using James Clear's 4 laws of behavior change.
Yeah.
But what about those bad habits that just won't quit?
Yeah, how do we get rid of those?
Well, it's time to make those bad habits less appealing.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, one of James Clear's most effective strategies is to increase the friction associated with a bad habit.
Okay, so make it inconvenient.
Yeah, make it a hassle to do. So, for example, remember the story about James Ritty, the saloon owner who invented the cash register?
The cash register, what does that have to do with bad habits?
Well, back then, employee theft was a big problem.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
It was really easy for bartenders to just, pocket some of the cash.
Yeah.
But Ritty's invention made that practically impossible.
Okay.
Because the money would be automatically locked in the register after each transaction.
Oh, so he increased the friction for stealing.
Exactly. Made it a lot harder to get away with.
Okay, so we need to find our own cash register, so to speak, for our bad habits.
Exactly. What obstacles can you put in place to make it harder to indulge in those bad habits?
Well, I'm notorious for, scrolling on social media.
Yeah.
Maybe I should delete those apps from my phone.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Make it harder to access them.
Make it more of a hassle. Or use one of those website blocking apps.
Right, those are good.
Just to make it harder to reach those distractions.
Yeah, it's like building a little wall between me and the temptation.
Exactly. But what about those habits that feel almost automatic?
Yeah, like stress eating. I can't exactly lock away my fridge.
Right. Well, remember the habit loop that we talked about?
Yeah.
You can actually interrupt that cycle at any stage. So instead of trying to avoid the cue altogether, what if you change your response to it?
Okay, so have a plan.
Yeah. So let's say your cue is you're feeling stressed.
Right.
And your response is that you go to the pantry and you start, mindlessly eating.
Yep.
What if instead of reaching for food, you took a few deep breaths, you went for a walk.
Okay.
Or you called a friend.
So have a predetermined response that's healthier.
Exactly. Something that's more aligned with your goals.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
But you know what happens when we slip up?
Yeah, of course.
We're only human.
Yeah.
Does James Clear have any advice on dealing with those inevitable setbacks?
Yeah, he does. He talks a lot about self-compassion.
Okay.
And he really emphasizes that setbacks are a normal part of the process.
Yeah, they happen.
And beating yourself up only makes things worse.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Because I'll admit, when I slip up one time, it makes me feel like throwing in the towel altogether.
Yeah.
Like, well, I already messed up. Might as well just keep going.
We've all been there. But James Clear suggests a different approach. He says we should view those slip-ups as data points.
Data points. Not failures.
Not failures, data points.
Okay, I like that a lot better.
It's not as emotionally charged, so you can use them to learn and to adjust your approach.
Okay, so how do we use these data points?
Well, you ask yourself, what triggered the slip-up? What could I do differently next time?
Okay.
It's about continuous improvement, not perfection.
So we should be curious about our slip-ups, not judgmental.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that a lot. It takes the pressure off. But speaking of pressure, James Clear talks a lot about systems, not goals.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit more? I always get kind of lost in the whole system versus goal debate.
Yeah, well, it is a subtle distinction, but it's really powerful.
Right.
Think of it this way. Goals are about the results that you want to achieve.
Right.
But systems are the processes that get you there.
Okay, so my goal might be to run a marathon, but my system is the training schedule.
Exactly.
The nutrition plan, the early morning runs.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
And James Clear argues that focusing too much on the goal can actually be counterproductive.
Really?
Because it can create this pressure cooker environment where you're constantly fixated on the outcome rather than enjoying the process.
Yeah, it's like, enjoy the journey, not the destination.
Exactly. So how does this system-focused approach actually help us build better habits?
That's a good question.
Well, by focusing on the system, you create a framework for consistent progress. It's like building a machine that generates the results that you want almost automatically.
Okay, so instead of relying on willpower and motivation, which can be kind of flaky,
Totally.
we're creating a structure that supports us even when we're not feeling our best.
Exactly. And a good system is designed for continuous improvement. So it's not about finding the perfect routine right away.
Okay.
It's about constantly experimenting, tweaking, refining your approach based on what's working and what's not.
So it's like we're scientists gathering data, making adjustments.
That's a good way to think about it. Makes it feel a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, more of a process of discovery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away with building our systems, I want to circle back to something that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Finding our sweet spot. How do we know which habits are right for us?
Right.
Like the ones that are really going to move the needle in our lives?
That is a really crucial question. And we're going to dive deep into that in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to explore how our personalities, our strengths, and even our challenges can guide us towards those habits that will truly unlock our full potential.
Ooh, I can't wait. Don't miss part 3, where we'll continue our exploration of atomic habits and learn how to create a life we love, one tiny habit at a time. Okay, we're back. Ready to wrap up our deep dive into atomic habits.
Let's do it.
We've learned so much already about the habit loop, the 4 laws of behavior change, and even how to break free from those bad habits that have been holding us back. But now for the grand finale. We're talking about finding our sweet spot.
Yeah, those golden habits that really align with who we are.
So how do we know which habits are truly right for us, the ones that are going to make the biggest impact?
Well, it all comes down to understanding how your unique personality influences your habits.
Okay.
We often try to force ourselves into habits that just don't mesh with our natural tendencies.
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for frustration.
So it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly. We need to find habits that actually fit us.
I like that.
Yeah.
So where do we start? How do we figure out what those habits are?
Well, James Clear talks about this explore-exploit trade-off.
Okay.
And first, we need to explore different activities, try new things, pay attention to what comes easily to us. What do we enjoy? What do we naturally excel at?
So it's about self-discovery.
Yeah, figuring out our strengths and passions before we even try to build habits around them.
That makes sense. It's like finding your element.
Exactly.
That space where your skills and interests intersect.
Yeah, and James Clear uses the example of Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert.
Oh, yeah, I love Dilbert.
Yeah, he was able to combine his love of drawing with his business background to create this really unique and successful niche.
That's a great example. It shows how aligning your habits with your natural talents can really lead to amazing things.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who are still, figuring out our passions. Any advice for people who are still in that exploration phase?
Yeah, James Clear suggests embracing curiosity and experimentation.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to try new things, even if they seem a little outside your comfort zone. You never know what hidden talents or interests you might uncover.
Okay. So we've explored, we've discovered our strengths, we've started building habits that align with who we are. But what about those inevitable plateaus? You know those times when we feel stuck, like you're not making progress?
Yeah, we all hit those.
And that's when my motivation tends to take a nosedive.
I hear you. Well, that's where James Clear's Goldilocks rule comes in.
Okay, tell me about it.
He argues that we need to find that sweet spot of challenge. So a task that's just slightly beyond our current abilities.
So not too easy that we get bored, but not too difficult that we get discouraged.
Exactly. Like finding that perfect bowl of porridge.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah, but how do we actually maintain that motivation when the work gets tedious or repetitive?
Right. Well, James Clear reminds us that the ability to handle boredom is often the key differentiator between those who succeed and those who don't.
So being able to handle boredom is a superpower.
It kind of is.
Okay.
He tells this great story about an elite coach who observed that the best athletes are the ones who can tolerate the monotony of training day after day, even when it's not glamorous.
So it's not always about feeling passionate or excited. It's about showing up and doing the work.
Exactly. Even when it feels like a grind.
Okay. And James Clear offers this helpful reframe for those moments when we're tempted to, skip a workout or procrastinate on a project. Instead of viewing those things as chores, we can see them as opportunities to practice our craft.
Exactly, and to build mastery.
So it's like those musicians who diligently practice their scales every day.
Yes.
Even though it's not the most exciting thing in the world.
Exactly. They understand that those seemingly boring repetitions are actually building the foundation for something amazing.
I love that. And this brings us to one of my favorite insights from the book. James Clear says, success is not a goal to reach or a finish line to cross. It is a system to improve, an endless process to refine.
I love that quote.
Me too. It really shifts the perspective.
It does.
It's not about reaching some magical destination.
Yeah.
It's about embracing this ongoing journey of growth and development.
It's about building a system of continuous improvement where we're constantly experimenting, learning, refining our approach.
So it's like we're all works in progress.
We are.
Constantly evolving and becoming better versions of ourselves.
Exactly. And remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Small changes consistently applied can lead to remarkable results over time.
Well said. This deep dive into atomic habits has been absolutely incredible. We've learned so much about how habits work, how to break free from the ones that hold us back, and how to build new ones that can help us achieve our goals.
It all starts with awareness, understanding our current habits, and identifying those areas where we can make those small 1% improvements.
So the journey starts today. What's one small habit that you can implement right now to move you closer to the life that you want?
Choose wisely.
Watch those tiny actions compound into something truly extraordinary. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep learning. The power to change your life is within you, one small habit at a time.